Hello students, we are looking at the most powerful persons in the world's two largest democracies, the Indian Prime Minister and the President of the USA. Howdy Modi was an extravagant event in Houston, Texas, USA, where the Indian Prime Minister interacted with a jam-packed stadium. This favor was returned by inviting Trump to India in February 2020 as India inaugurated the Motera Stadium in Ahmedabad, Gujarat. America has a president but no prime minister. India has a prime minister as well as the president. What then is the role of the president of India given that the prime minister is the real head of the country? Well, the Indian president is the formal head of the country. He has been given a set of powers. Let us study them in our chapter titled Union Executive. The powers and functions of the president can be best understood by their nature. These are executive powers, legislative powers, financial powers, judicial powers, diplomatic powers, military powers, and emergency powers. Some of the important executive powers of the president are: all executive actions of the Government of India are formally taken in his name. The President appoints the Prime Minister and other ministers. He appoints the governors of states. He directly administers the union territories through administrators appointed by him. We have discussed the legislative powers of the President in our previous chapter that included summoning and dissolving the Lok Sabha, and that no bill can become an act without his assent. The financial powers of the President are: money bills can be introduced in the Parliament only with the prior recommendation of the President. He can make advances out of the contingency fund of India to meet any unforeseen circumstances. Judicial powers. The 2012 Nirbhaya case convicts were hanged to death this year in Tihar jail. Originally, January 22 was fixed as the date of execution. It was then postponed to February 1 and then postponed again. And during this time, they filed a mercy petition before the President of India, which was rejected. As a result, they were hanged on March 20, 2020 at 5:30 a.m. We discuss this case because the judicial powers empower the President to grant pardon or commute the sentence of any person convicted of any offense. Besides, it is the President who appoints the Chief Justice and other judges of the Supreme Court and High Courts. He can also seek advice from the Supreme Court on any question of law. However, the advice given by the Supreme Court is not binding on the President. The diplomatic powers of the President are: the international treaties and agreements are negotiated and concluded on behalf of the President. He sends and receives diplomats like ambassadors and high commissioners. Militarily, the President can declare war or conclude peace subject to the approval of the Parliament. The President of India is the Supreme Commander of the Defence Forces of India. He appoints the Chief of Defence Staff and the Chiefs of Army, Navy, and Air Force. Regarding emergency powers bestowed by the Constitution, the President can proclaim a national emergency after receiving a written recommendation from the Cabinet. He can impose President's rule in any state due to failure to comply with the directions given by the Union. The President may impose a financial emergency if he is satisfied that the financial stability of India is threatened. That completes the various executive powers of the President of India. Now, most of these powers can be put to effect only on the aid and advice of the Council of Ministers, which is controlled by the Prime Minister. That makes the Prime Minister the real executive authority. Hence, let us look at the powers and functions of the Prime Minister. Powers in relation to the Council of Ministers. The Prime Minister recommends persons who can be appointed as ministers by the President. If Goa has had the privilege to have had late Sri Manohar Parrikar as the Defence Minister of India, it is for this reason. The Prime Minister allocates and reshuffles various portfolios among the ministers. The powers of the Prime Minister in relation to President. The Prime Minister is the link of communication between the President and the Council of Ministers. All the executive decisions taken by the Cabinet are conveyed to the President by the Prime Minister. He advises the President with regard to the appointment of important officials such as the Attorney General of India and the Election Commissioners. Powers of the Prime Minister in relation to Parliament. He advises the President as to when to summon the sessions of Parliament. The 2020 monsoon session of Parliament has been delayed for a long time due to the pandemic, so much so that the monsoon is almost over. So it's likely to be held either by the end of August or at start of September, depending on the decision taken by the Prime Minister. He can also ask the President to dissolve the Lok Sabha at any time. He announces government policies on the floor of the House. Other powers include he is the leader of the party in power. He plays a significant role in shaping the foreign policy of the country. It is the Prime Minister that decides on friendships and agreements with different countries. We have seen his bonding with American President Donald Trump. He also hosted Japanese President Shinzo Abe. Had coconut water in Chennai with Chinese President Xi Jinping. Now you may say that India-China are not friends anymore. True. You know that all kinds of friendships go through breakup, don't you? PM also had a good time on the beach with Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu. The Prime Minister's office has a lot of work to do, and all this work cannot be done alone by the Prime Minister. Hence, he has a Council of Ministers. The Prime Minister presides over the meetings and influences its decisions as he is the head of the Council. There are two categories of ministers in the Council of Ministers. They are Cabinet Ministers and Ministers of State. The Cabinet Ministers include heads of important ministries of the central government such as Home, Defence, Finance, External Affairs, Road Transport and Highways, to name a few. The Ministers of State can be given independent charge of ministries or can be attached to Cabinet Ministers. For example, Shripad Naik is the Minister of State, independent charge for Ayush Ministry as well as Minister of State for Defence. The difference lies in the fact that they are not cabinet members and cannot attend cabinet meetings. The cabinet is the core committee of ministers and their role is as follows. It is the highest decision-making authority in the country. It is the chief policy formulating body of the central government. It is an advisory body to the President and its advice is binding on the President, so he has to follow their advice. To enable the smooth functioning of the government, cabinet committees are formed. Basically, there are two types of cabinet committees: standing committee and ad hoc committee. Remember, ad hoc committees are formed for a particular purpose as necessary, and once the task is over, the committee ceases to exist. So you can relate to them as temporary committees. Standing committees have greater power and are headed by a cabinet minister. Parliamentary Standing Committee has been in the eye of the storm recently as it summoned Facebook officials on September 2, 2020 to discuss the alleged misuse of social media platforms for hate speech and political benefit. To wind up, the two parliamentary committees are Standing Committee and Ad Hoc Committee. That covers most of the executive powers for our study. We had begun this chapter with the powers of the President of India, so before we wind up, let us understand how the President of India is elected. The President of India is elected through indirect election in which the common man has no right to vote. So who can vote in a presidential election? MPs and MLAs, that is, elected members of the parliament that include Rajya Sabha and Lok Sabha members, as well as elected members of state legislative assemblies. To be eligible to run for the office of the President of India, a person should be a citizen of India, should have completed 35 years of age, he should not hold any office of profit under the union or state government, he should not be a member of either the parliament or the state legislature. Post-election, the Chief Justice of India administers the oath of office to the President of India. Impeachment means removal of the President. The President can resign from his office at any time by addressing the letter to the Vice President of India. Reasons for removal of the President? If MPs want to remove the President, they can, on grounds of violation of the Constitution. The impeachment process can be initiated in either House of Parliament and must be passed by not less than 2/3 majority of the House. If the other House investigates the charge and proceeds with 2/3 majority, the President stands impeached from office. So, we have looked at the electoral process for the President and taken a quick look at the various powers of the President, powers of the Prime Minister and the Council of Ministers. That sums up our chapter, the Union Executive. Thank you.